let's go ahead and let's get into the campfire chat. What actually was covered and my thoughts on it. So there's going to be some, maybe some takes here that'll be a little bit different than you get from a lot of people since, well, clearly I play a lot of Last Epoch. But I also play a lot of D4. Not as much, but I still write for Max Roll on D4. I have maintained 3 different build guides. So I will also call out interesting, I don't want to call synergies, similarities between the systems and how I feel about them. TLDR, I like them. There's some things in here that I think that they're taking pretty clearly from Last Epoch, but also from some other places. And I think it's the right move. If you can't do better than what's already out there, then take what you've got out there and make it your own. And I think there's going to be some of that in here. Okay, let's start with the big stuff that they covered in the campfire chat, which is the itemization. This was easily the biggest part of it, although there were several large sections. But this is the part for me that was the biggest. It's the biggest change to the game in general. And they covered it in kind of a weird way, where they talked about some of the features that simplify the game more early, and then later they talked about the stuff that actually expand it, which made it look kind of weird. So I'm going to open by saying we're going to start with that stuff too, but we're going to talk about the expanding stuff pretty quickly afterwards. Stat changes was a simplification system of the system. So right now you get 4 affixes on an item. That's dropping to 3 on legendaries and 2 on rares, which is going to effectively make rares useless compared to legendaries, as I understand it. Once you start dropping your legendaries, you get an additional stat. There's no way to make up for that stat on a rare, as I understand it. So you're going to be hunting legendaries now. And you're going to get 3 total affixes, and those affixes have changed pretty drastically. The damage on Tuesday stuff seems to be gone. Doesn't seem like there's much of that anymore. It's very basic, not basic, but it's very straightforward. Vulnerable damage, just straight damage, intelligence, life, etc. You won't have to try to figure out when this stat's going to apply to whatever you're trying to do. Are you putting poison on enough to get your poison damage reduction, etc.? All that stuff's going away. I think this is a good thing. While that can be kind of fun to figure out what conditionals work for builds, it can also be very confusing. I don't think it was bringing a lot of diversity to the game overall. It was just making casual players struggle with it. So I don't mind this, especially with some of the other stuff we're going to talk about going forward. So going down to 3 affixes sounds bad, but we're actually going to be going up to a total of 5, as we'll talk about in a minute. So I'm okay with that too. What this is going to do is make it easier for you to find the items that you want to start with. So the big thing they were talking about here is that there's a journey now with items instead of an item dropping and it's like God tier for you and that's just your item. That's the one that you want. There's nothing else to do. Now you're going to have a journey of trying to transform that item into the God tier item. So you want to start with a great base and then improve it from there. So only having to look for 3 affixes is good in that scenario, because they make it more likely that you're going to find a great base to start with. So that all is good within the context of the other stuff we're going to talk about. I don't think there's any serious problems with the way that they're handling that stat change. Another big thing that they're doing is codex. This is something that was asked for a long time. The codex right now, you get your legendary aspect from it, and it's always minimum rolled, and you can't do anything about that. And so you had to collect lots and lots of gear that had higher rolled ones and maintain it in your stash in order to pull the that aspect off of it and put it on another item. That's going away. Once you break down an item that has a higher roll on the of an aspect, it goes into your codex and it's maintained permanently until you improve it further, until you get the max, at which point that affix will now be, that legendary aspect will now be maximum always. So you can always pull it off and put the maximum on any gear that you want to, that it applies to. It's a big win. It's a big quality of life win there. Gonna make it a lot easier to hunt for the more interesting things, because it's not particularly interesting to be hunting multiple times for max aspects to try to slam them into something else. It can be pretty tedious, and it can cause you to not be able to get an upgrade that you'd otherwise be able to wear because you didn't get the right aspect for it to put it on it. That's not a problem anymore. They also showed off a UI that looked much better as far as trying to find the codexes you're looking for and seeing what role you have in there. I think that was all a pretty big win. Now let's talk about some of the big changes that are actually making the itemization more interesting, and why I think itemization is going to be much, much better in Diablo 4. It's still not perfect, but it's much, much better. Tempering. Tempering is a new system where you can add on up to 2 new affixes on an item. If it is a ancestral, you will be able to put on 2 affixes, and these affixes are different than the ones you're going to find in the world. So you have the 3 affixes that exist in the world on items as they drop. You can now add on 2 that are very different. So not intelligence or strength or just regular damage. They're going to be something probably more class specific or build specific. And you're going to have different types of this. It actually follows kind of similarly to how legendary aspects work, where maybe it's a weapon type of fix, or maybe it's an offensive type of fix. And so you'll be able to put 1 of or 2 of those types on there. They're going to be different ones. So you can have 2 weapon ones, but you have a weapon and offense on there. And you can pull them from a new item type that drops. What's it called again? It was what was the name of that? It's like a book basically that has a certain small number of affixes in it. And then you can put that book into this tempering system and pull 1 of those affixes off and add it to the item. Manual, thank you. Yeah, so it's a manual. So you find these manuals in the world. They have these items, these affix types on them. You can put the manual in there with the item you want to add it onto, and then it will take 1 of those off there. And you can re-roll that a certain number of times. There's a set number of times you can do this. So you're trying to get the right affix on there, and you re-roll it until you get it, or you don't get it, and maybe you have to start over with a new item. But there's probably a decent chance you'll get it because there's not a lot of affixes. It looks like there's 5 different affixes in them, and you can re-roll 4 times. There's a decent chance you're going to get the one you're looking for, but you have to do it twice because you want 2 different affixes you want to put on for a total of 5 affixes. You have the 3 that are already on your gear, and those ones you're not tempering on, they're just already there. And then you're going to temper 2 new ones on. So you have 5 total affixes on items thanks to tempering. So we actually gained an affix from what we had before, which is 4. There's also a thing called greater affix. Oh, I should mention in tempering, comparison to LE, the new reroll system feels quite a bit like Forging Potential. It's not exactly the same, but it has that kind of similarity where there's a finish point to your gear, and it might not be when you wanted it to be. You might not perfect it, and you have to go back and find something else. This is not a bad thing. This is one of the things that makes the chase finale so exciting, and makes slamming what you actually want into so exciting. Obviously, it feels bad when you don't get what you want, but you need some of that kind of RNG in it to continue to make items. Is a problem PoE has. Once you get a base that's good enough, you can just keep crafting on it, crafting and crafting until you finally get the item that you want, making the loot that drops on the ground much less valuable. It's not a problem that Ellie has. This system should make it so the D4 doesn't generally have that problem either, hopefully. So that's a pretty good thing, I think. Greater affixes are another system that seems, this one's eerily similar to Ellie, but they're not the first one to do something like this. It's also similar to the D3 Ancestral. Is it Ancestral? Was that what they were called in D3? The D3 system, where an affix could roll higher than normal, and only on the ones on the ground. You couldn't craft this up. You get a 50% higher roll, and it's always guaranteed to be max. So now the gear chase is going to be probably looking for items that have 1 or more greater affixes on them that are the right types for you, because you can't craft these on your items. You can't even re-roll into these. The re-roll system still exists where you can roll out of one stat into another one, but you can never roll into a greater affix, even if it was a greater affix. So like exalted items in Last Epoch, you have to find these on the ground. You cannot craft these, and so that's going to be your crafting base. You're looking for greater affixes on items, especially the affixes that are the most important to you, and you're going to start with that, and then you're going to craft the item up from there. So that's going to be what I think the chase will be. Once you get an item with a greater affix or affixes that you wanted, and you temper the right additional affixes on it that you want to, that's when masterworking comes in. And masterworking is a way to upgrade your gear, but it's different than the current upgrade system, which is going away. In this one, you have to go into a new endgame system called the Pit that we'll talk about in a little bit. And you farm up a new type of crafting material that is then used to upgrade your items up to 12 times. You can max each one out at 12. Now, as you're upgrading these, most of the upgrades will be a small stat bonus to all of the affixes on your gear. However, the 4th, 8th, and 12th upgrade, so every 4, are going to be a big bonus to only one of the affixes. It can be any of the 5 affixes you have on it. So it can be the base 3, or it can be the tempered ones. And this is going to happen 3 times. It's random which one's going to happen to. It can happen to the same one all 3 times. It can happen to 3 different ones. It can happen to one twice, another one once. But it's going to be 3 times total. And this is going to make an interesting chase to try to get items that have probably the best affix upgraded twice, or maybe you do a 2-1 in some cases, but probably most of the time you're looking to get the best affix on the item to have all 3. It's going to be very, very difficult to do that if you consider you have like a 1 in 5 chance. Assuming all rolls are equal, you have a 1 in 5 chance. So 20% chance, 20% chance, 20% chance. Where that math is really low. It's really low that you're going to get 20% chance 3 times in a row. But it is possible, and so it's going to be an interesting min-maxing, getting your masterworking stuff going on. I think this is a good system overall. It's not like the most crazy awesome system, but it's definitely an upgrade, an improvement over the current upgrading system, which is straight up just stat bonuses for gold, and you're done. And some crafting materials, you're done. And it had like no depth or strategy whatsoever. No interesting reason why you might try to do it on another item. This is definitely an improvement. That's the big changes for itemization. The no loot filter we'll talk about in a second, and why that's related, or why that's related to another changes here. But that's the big ones. As far as gems go, they've made gems better because the stats are better, but they're about the same. So like instead of it being critical strike damage when vulnerable, it's just critical strike damage. That's good. That'll make more gems more valuable, but gems are still what they are. Like they're not gonna, you don't expect these to be like crazy cool or interact with any special interesting way with a new system. It's just gonna be you toss on gems, but the gems are better than they were. As far as no loot filter goes, so there will not be a loot filter, and here is how they're justifying it. Items are going to drop less often, and you're going to care about even fewer. So once legendaries start dropping, you don't care about rares. When ancestrals start dropping, you don't care about sacreds. That's already true, but it's even more true. And in fact, sacreds won't even drop in World Tier 4. And normal items won't drop in World Tier 3, only sacreds will. And then as soon as you get the legendaries, like, you just don't care about rares. Like, rares have 1 fewer fix. Why would you care about that? So you're going to only be hunting uniques. They're going to drop less often than they currently do. All items are going to drop less often. The drop rates have been lowered. And you're going to care about fewer of the items that are actually on the ground. Assuming they even do drop. So you're going to start caring about uniques. And then at some point, you're going to start caring only about ones with greater affixes. So anything that doesn't have greater affixes on it, you just leave on the ground. Or you sell it for gold, and you already know you're going to do that. This is how they're justifying not needing a loot filter. I think this is wrong. I think they're incorrect and think you don't need a loot filter. You don't need a crazy complex loot filter. You don't even need anything at the level of LE. But you need something in here to say, look, I just don't want to look at items that I'm not going to need. I don't want them on the ground. If I'm looking for like an item with 1 greater affix or more, I don't care about anything that doesn't have that. You should just be able to remove it. Especially since they also said that the pit system, the new endgame system, is going to drop more loot as you go higher into it. Okay, well, that is exactly why I would need a loot filter, because I'm going to drop more loot as things get harder, but I care about less loot as I get farther in because my gear is getting better. Just give me a loot filter. I think this is going to be an L for them. It's not going to be a massive L, but I think it's going to be an L that they're not adding a loot filter. They should have done something with this. That is pretty much the itemization change, though. So less things are going to drop on the ground, but you won't get a loot filter. Items are going to have fewer stats inherently built into them, but you're going to be able to add more, and then you're going to be able to upgrade them in a more interesting way. And then gems are just better. Itemization overall is a lot better. This is going to be much closer to other ARPGs, while still not being super complicated and still being casual friendly for the most part. I think this is a pretty big win for Diablo 4. This is kind of the sort of system we need, and it's something I think they can tack on more stuff to and make it more interesting over time. This is a good base setup that's just far superior to what we had before, which isn't saying that much, I know, because what we had before was really bad, but this is actually pretty solid. All right, let's talk about some of the other stuff that they went over. Leveling changes. So the new Diablo 4, they want you to get to the end game faster. They want you to get to level 100 faster. They want you to get to where you're focusing on getting your itemization to be stronger more quickly, to get all the exciting drops. So because of that, they're going to give more XP to higher tiers. So world tiers, higher, tier 2 is now from 20% XP to 50% XP, I think it was. So now we're probably going to do tier 2 to level. And then tier 3 gives more XP and tier 4 gives more XP. So we're going to level faster, get to the end game faster, which honestly, even from the beginning of the game, you're pretty much in the end game because there is no campaign, but you'll be getting to that higher tier of loot that you care about, because world tier 3 now gives loot that's generally not good for you once you get to world tier 4, because it's no ancestrals on there. That being said, there are some things that can drop at lower levels now that could be exciting as you go. Uniques drop at lower levels than they used to, and Ubers also drop in World Tier 3 now. So it is possible to get an Uber in World Tier 3. Good luck. Like, it's unlikely you're going to get it, but you could. You could get it. So that is a big positive, I guess. What's a positive? It's a positive that you can get Ubers dropping lower, and they're going to drop at 925, which is the highest tier. I should mention, I didn't have it on here. 925. I'm actually going to pop that in here real quick. So the 925 chase is an interesting change to the game's itemization. So 925 item level is now going to start popping in like as a guaranteed pretty fairly early in World Tier 4, it looks like. And so you're no longer going to be caring about the item level of the gear. You're going to be caring more about the affixes it has on it and the things you can do with it once you get it. Does it have a greater affix on it? That's what you're going to be caring about. I think this is a good thing. I think item level is kind of like a weak stat overall, but just want to point that out, that 925 is not a big deal for you anymore. Or it is a big deal, but you're going to start getting those as guarantees. You're going to be trying to push to get to 925 item level as fast as you can, so that's good. All right, as unique drops, higher tiers, talked about that. Let's move on to the balance changes. There's a lot of stuff, and a lot of it they didn't even cover with us. But there's a couple of things I wanted to point out here in particular. There really is quite a bit going on in balance, it looks like, for them, which makes sense because this is a massive itemization change. And so they're using this as a chance to improve in areas where maybe it was harder to do before. One of them is minions. Minions used to not scale with your stats. Now they do 100% as of Season 4. That's really good if you've been trying to make minion builds viable, which you've been pretty much unable to do. You might now be able to do it because they're taking all of your stats. That's going to clearly be a better scaler than it is currently. Is it going to make them good? I don't know. But if I had to guess, they're going to at least be viable. So, hey, if you've been a minion fan who's been looking for minions to actually be solid in D4, this might be the season where that actually happens. The other thing they're doing that might have a fairly decent effect on build diversity, which is not something that's going to be significantly improved overall in Season 4. If you're someone who's looking for like, hey, can I get more than 2 options on my skills as far as the passive tree? I'm sorry, but no, you still have 2 options, but a lot of the items and affixes are getting opened up to be more generally useful. So like something that said, this is an example they use, something that said used on core skills now will be just used on skills. I think Azurath was the sword they used an example where you had a chance to freeze unlucky hit on core skills. Now it's a chance to freeze on any skill. That might open up some actual builds that don't currently exist. Like there might be a basic skill Azurath build where it freezes and also does base damage, which they are affecting base damage as well. We didn't talk about it in here, but base damage on we'll call them sub skills, like procs that go off on gear, is now going to scale with your weapon. So that between that and this opening up of items and fixes might actually create some build diversity. Not a lot. I'm not saying this is going to be like Last Epoch or PoE levels of build diversity. It's not. It's not going to be close. But there might be a few more that come online, which is always good. They definitely need to do more here in the future, but at least we get something there. Okay, let's talk about the other sort of big topic and the one that I'm less positive and optimistic on, which is endgame. So the first one I'm somewhat positive on, which is Helltide's getting some changes. It's going to have a system now to where there's a threat level, and as you kill enemies, the threat level goes up, and eventually it goes to the point to where basically Hell starts coming after you, and you get lots of rare spawns and a new rare enemy type that are trying to kill you. There's also more general density in it and more random events. They did show some of the Helltide gameplay off during the Campfire chat. I have to say I was fairly underwhelmed. I thought I would like it more, but without playing it myself, it's hard to say. At the very least, this has to be better. Hell Tides are pretty boring. This has to be better. That doesn't fix the problem of Hell Tides being insanely easy for a reasonably well-geared character, and the new itemization changes might make that worse. But at least there's a good chance that Helltide will at least be fun for a while and more interesting. And also Helltide now shows up in Tier 1 and Tier 2, which is probably going to be my leveling strategy going forward because of all the density changes and all the other stuff. Helltide seems like a really good place to level up, and with at least some randomization and dynamic spawning could be somewhat fun to do so as far as, you know, leveling in D4 goes. The next one is definitely one I'm not as happy about, which is the Pit, or the Pit of Despair, which I'm calling it right now. The Pit is a new endgame system that is tied to masterworking, and masterworking being that system where you upgrade your gear. And that's fine by itself, but the problem with the Pit is it is Greater Rifts. It is almost exactly Greater Rifts. It is, I mean, almost exactly Greater Rifts, to the extent where even the thing you interact with in the world looks like the thing from Greater Rifts, and it like has an animation like Greater Rifts, and like the UI is just you selecting from different tiers of things, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It is pretty much exactly Greater Rifts. There, you go into the Pit and you have a timer, and then you have to kill the enemy in a certain period of time, and you have to fill up a bar to get to kill the boss. Like, it is almost exactly Greater Rifts. You go from one floor to the second floor. Like, I don't know how to, like, it is almost exactly Greater Rifts. And I don't think Greater Rifts is a very good system in modern day RPGs. I don't think that taking that system from Diablo 3 is the lesson they should have learned. And after we've just gotten a pretty crappy endgame system, which is the new leaderboard gauntlet system, and we had AOZ before that, which, by the way, was their inspiration, and they talked positively about AOZ, which was fascinating to see because AOZ was a massive flop. This is what they came up with, and I just don't think it's going to be very well received. If you played D3 and you liked D3 and you liked rifting, then you'll like it. But if you didn't, you won't like it. I think it's going to be pretty boring. We'll see how this, plays out when we actually get our hands on it, but they did show some gameplay of it, and I'm telling you, it was Greater Rifts. The only difference that I could see was when you fought the boss, because there was a boss fight at the end, which is a little bit different because it looked like you went to an arena, and then there was like a shade of another boss that could show up. In the particular one we saw, it was fighting the rogue type, like, mini boss thing, and there was actually a shade of Lilith doing her like dive bomb attack thing on it. So that was kind of interesting, I guess. And apparently, as higher you go, you can get 2 of those shade effects going off. I mean, there's something there, but like, there's no juicing. There's no diversity of that system. There's no depth to that system at all. That is about as basic of an endgame system as you could possibly imagine, and that's what they have added after they just did the same thing with Gauntlet. This is an area where the game needs to improve, and it's going to be the next thing they have to account for. They have to make endgame something that's more like a modern day ARPG, and this is further evidence to me that they don't know how to do that. So I'm going to be watching this very closely, and I'm going to be criticizing it because I think they need to adjust their opinion about what endgame is supposed to look like drastically. And to that, we also have some stuff about the boss ladder, the ladder bosses or whatever, where you kill this boss and then it drops materials. You kill this other one, drops materials, use those materials to kill another boss, and then so on and so forth. They added another one to that ladder, Andariel. So we have more materials to go after. We do have boss mats dropping from more sources, so that's good, but it's like a small chance they'll drop from other sources. The boss ladder seems to be pretty well maintained here. They did mention very quickly their level 200 ladder bosses could be a thing, which sounds like at least there's a chance that these will be more difficult and interesting fights, so that's good. But the whole ladder boss system being how you primarily farm Uber Uniques, I think is massively flawed. And so leaning further into that concerns me. I think that system needs a massive rework. But at least there's some things here that make it a little bit better. I just don't think that making it better is ever going to be the solution. So I'm concerned about Endgame. The Helltide changes looked good in the face of it. I didn't see compelling gameplay when they showed it, but it was a small snippet. There could be a lot more going on that we didn't get a chance to look at. So I'm holding out some optimism for that one. The Pit, I don't have much optimism for that. I think it's going to feel pretty bad to be playing that for long periods of time. Not really a significant improvement on Nightmare Dungeons, which are already pretty bad. And then the boss ladder bosses stuff, I don't like that system. I burn out very, very quickly fighting Uber Duriel over and over to try to get my Uber uniques. It's just not a fun loop. So we'll see if this really does make a difference with at least some depth to it, or some difficulty to it with level 200 ones, if that's how that works. But I think Endgame needs to be the next thing they hit hard. Like Season 5, Season 6, or the expansion needs to be a lot of Endgame improvements. All right, the last stuff we want to talk about here are some QOL features, and then there's a bonus here. The QOL features, if you felt like the game was too zoomed in, I have good news for you. They're going to zoom it out a bit. So you can now zoom it out a bit. So you will not be as close to your character as you currently are. I know a lot of people do not like how close you are. It's not something that super bothered me before, but I can understand it, and I'll definitely zoom it out further if I can. That's now an option going into Season 4, so that's a win. It's just a straight-up win. And then pre-Season 4, there's a new patch coming out that's going to add some new quality of life features and apparently some visual, and included with that is ray tracing. So if you're someone who has like a high enough powered PC and you wanted to be able to have things like ray tracing, you are about to get that, and you don't have to wait for Season 4. It's going to be, I think it said, within about a week or so. So that's a win, too. Okay, the bonus thing. At the beginning of the Campfire chat, they talked about this SARPG thing. It seems like a new phrase, or new phrase they're trying to coin, which means systems ARPG, and they're using this to try to differentiate it from other things that they consider to be ARPGs. Their idea of what an ARPG is odd to me. Some of the examples they had, like Hollow Knight, is not what I would call an ARPG, but anyway... they tried to coin this new phrase, but I think there's some value to what they were trying to do. While I think the coining of the phrase is pretty weak and kind of a weird thing to try to do, the whole goal here seemed to be that they understand that Diablo-like RPGs are defined by the systems in them and how good those are. Seems pretty obvious when you say it that way, I think, but is your endgame systems good? Are your itemization systems good? And it's good that they know that. Like, that's a positive. I do think that's how they were trying to frame this, and then they were trying to frame the itemization based around that. SARPG is strange, though. Like, I don't think it's going to catch on. I don't know why they're trying to... And they use it multiple times. They use it multiple times in Campfire. So it's clearly not just like this one-off. They use it towards the end of it as well. They seem to want SARPG to be a thing. Anyway, let me know how you think if SARPG should be how we describe PoE and LE and Diablo now. But that was the last thing they talked about. It was an odd one. I am glad that they described what they think an ARPG, a Diablo-like ARPG is, even if they did a little weird. That was good. And hopefully they can extrapolate what they were talking about their systems being good to the end game and make that a lot better. And then if they can make their end game a lot better than it currently is, like actually make it a pretty good end game, the itemization stuff I think is going far enough along to we can say it's going to be pretty good. They can definitely expand upon it, but the end game is where this game is going to be lacking. So we'll see how that goes. They did not talk about the seasonal mechanics at all. Nothing whatsoever about the new season, except for saying that most of the development was going towards this stuff, which certainly seemed like they were trying to anchor us to a weaker season. This is the odd seasons, which has, this is the even seasons, which has historically been better. I mean, there's only one, but season 2 was better than season 1 and season 3, and there are 2 different dev teams. There's a odd season and an even season, so that seems like a positive for this one. But none of the seasons have been amazing, and with that kind of anchoring to, hey, yeah, we were spending our time on this stuff. We'll see how the seasonal mechanic actually is. To be fair, though, if the season mechanic isn't special, I think the itemization changes carry this one, and this season's going to be pretty fun. As much as I'm down on the end game, I'm going to have a lot of fun chasing some of these items and trying to make them really powerful, and seeing all the different changes to builds and playing around with those and seeing if some of these uniques can like be extra powerful or broken. There's going to be a lot of things I'm going to enjoy about it. So regardless of the other things. Hopefully the season's great, and then that really brings the next level. But I think this is enough to say, yeah, the season's pretty solid. I'm gonna have a good time. So, yeah, overall, I'm pretty positive, even though I've got those negativity towards the end game. I'm pretty positive about they took this one system that was bad and made it pretty good, and they did it in like effectively a 3-month period. That's pretty ambitious and showing a lot of taking back feedback from the community and actually applying it in ways that are meaningful. So I do hope that they can do the same thing for endgame going forward, and I'm going to give them the opportunity to prove that they can do that because of the itemization changes. So that's all I wanted to say about this. Only a good half an hour of conversation about it. So yeah, looking forward to the new season. Oh, one other thing, PTR, Public Test Realm, starts on the 2nd and goes through the 9th, I believe, and I can't wait for that. So I'll definitely be on the PTR, testing things out, seeing what works, seeing what doesn't. I'm sure finding plenty of bugs, but also getting a feel for these itemization changes and the balance changes they've made. So look forward to that. And then, of course, the season, which has actually been pushed back now to May 15th, I believe. So the season's going to be a little ways out still like month and 3 weeks or something pretty far out. But when you're adding this much stuff, it makes sense. It doesn't bother me at all. Get this stuff right is more important, and then we'll have a good time when it comes out. So yeah, PTR will be great, and it'll be a good thing to like hold us over for a little bit, and then the season will start, and we'll hopefully have a good time with that. All right, thank you so much for watching. On YouTube, Chad, I'll be with you in a second, checking out what you were saying. Have a great rest of your time in whatever game you're playing. If you're playing Last Epoch right now, or if you're playing Diablo 4, and I'll see you again real soon.